Before this story begins, ask yourself one question. Can a quiet bond be stronger than loud passion? A young Western sheriff and a wise Apache woman defy age, judgment and tradition through respect and courage. What unfolds will challenge how you see love, duty, and honor. If you enjoy powerful, meaningful stories like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us until the end. The storm left the Apache settlement, quiet and changed. Broken fences, damaged homes, and exhausted families told the story of how close disaster had come. Daniel stayed longer than planned, helping repair roofs and distribute supplies, not as an officer giving orders, but as a man working with his hands. The community noticed his sincerity. Nalin watched him from a distance, her expression calm yet thoughtful. She had seen many men arrive with promises and leave when things became difficult. Daniel was different. He listened more than he spoke, and when he spoke, his words were careful and honest. In that silence after the storm, something deeper settled between them, steady and unspoken. Their conversations resumed in the evenings, sitting near the fire as the desert cooled. Daniel spoke about his childhood, growing up without much family, learning early that responsibility could feel like loneliness. Nalin shared stories of her youth, of marriage, loss, and the strength it took to stand again after grief. There was no rush in their words. Each sentence carried weight, shaped by years lived differently, but marked by similar struggles. Daniel never tried to impress her. Nalin never tried to guide him. They simply met each other where they were, letting understanding grow without expectation or demand. Back in town, Daniel faced growing pressure. His superiors questioned his frequent visits, warning him about appearances and political consequences. Friends advised him to keep his distance, reminding him of his age, his position, and his future. Daniel listened respectfully, but felt a quiet resistance inside. For the first time, he questioned whether following rules without thought truly meant doing what was right. He did not argue or rebel. Instead, he chose transparency, documenting every visit and every action, determined that integrity would protect both his badge and his conscience. Nalin, meanwhile, faced her own challenges. Some within the community worried that Daniel's presence would invite unwanted attention or misunderstandings. Others feared that history would repeat itself, that trust would once again be broken. Nalin did not defend herself loudly. She spoke to the elders privately, reminding them that respect was the foundation of their connection. She made it clear that she sought no favors, no protection, and no promises. What existed between them, she said, was built on choice and dignity. Her calm honesty eased fears, even if doubts did not disappear entirely. Time passed, and small moments became meaningful. A shared meal after a long day, a quiet walk along the edge of the settlement at sunset. The sound of laughter when Daniel struggled to learn Apache words and accepted correction with humility. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden declaration. Love in their case arrived slowly, shaped by patience. The age gap faded into the background, replaced by shared values. Daniel admired Nalin's resilience. Nalin respected Daniel's restraint. What grew between them was not youthful excitement, but a steady trust neither had known before. One afternoon, a conflict arose between ranchers and the Apache community over water access. Tensions escalated quickly, threatening violence. Daniel found himself in the center, expected to take sides. He chose a harder path, calling both groups together and insisting on dialogue. Nalin stood nearby, not interfering, but her presence strengthened his resolve. Hours of negotiation followed. Voices were raised, accusations made, but eventually compromise emerged. When agreement was reached, both sides looked at Daniel differently. He was no longer just a young sheriff. He was a bridge between worlds. That night, Daniel admitted to Nalin that he was afraid. Afraid of failing, of losing his career, of disappointing people who trusted him. Nalin listened quietly, then told him that fear was not weakness, only a sign that something mattered. She reminded him that every meaningful choice carried risk, and that avoiding pain often meant avoiding truth. Her words were not romantic, but they stayed with him. For the first time, Daniel felt truly seen, not as an officer or a young man, but as a human being. As seasons changed, their bond became visible in subtle ways. Daniel was welcomed more openly into the community. Nalin attended town gatherings without tension or apology. People began to understand that what connected them was not rebellion but balance. They respected boundaries. They moved slowly. Their relationship did not demand approval, yet it earned it through consistency. Even those who once criticized them grew quieter, realizing that scandal requires secrecy, and there was none to be found here. When Daniel was offered a transfer to a larger city, the decision weighed heavily on him. The promotion promised status and opportunity, but also distance from everything he had come to value. He discussed it with Nalin honestly, expecting her to encourage him to go. Instead, she told him that his path was his own, and that love should never be a cage. Her response surprised him. It showed him that her affection did not seek control, only truth. That night, Daniel realized that whatever he chose, he had already changed. Daniel declined the transfer, choosing to remain where he felt most needed. The decision was met with mixed reactions, but he stood firm. He understood now that success was not measured only by rank or recognition, but by alignment with one's values. Nalin did not celebrate loudly. She simply nodded, her eyes reflecting quiet pride. Their lives continued without dramatic shifts, yet everything felt different. They had chosen honesty over convenience, presence over ambition. Years later, people would speak of them with respect rather than curiosity. The young sheriff and the Apache woman became an example of how connection could grow without noise. They never claimed perfection. Disagreements still came, as they do in all meaningful relationships. But they faced them with patience, shaped by age, experience, and mutual regard. Their love did not erase differences. It honored them. In the end, their story was not about age, culture, or defiance. It was about two people who refused to let fear dictate their choices. In a world that often demanded quick judgments, they chose understanding. In a time that rewarded loud gestures, they lived quietly. And in that quiet, they found something rare and lasting. A love built not on impulse, but on respect, courage, and shared humanity. The decision to stay changed everything, even though nothing on the surface seemed dramatic. Daniel continued his duties as sheriff, but his presence carried a new steadiness. He was no longer proving himself to anyone. He had chosen his ground, and that gave him quiet confidence. Nalin sensed it immediately. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond shared moments into shared plans. Not about marriage or promises, but about how to live honorably in a complicated world. They both understood that love did not need constant declaration. It showed itself in choices, in consistency, and in the courage to remain when leaving would have been easier. Resistance did not disappear overnight. A few townspeople still watched with suspicion, and some officials kept Daniel under close observation. One formal complaint was even filed, questioning his judgment and impartiality. An internal review followed, testing his patience and resolve. Daniel cooperated fully, opening his records and explaining every decision calmly. Nalin stayed in the background, refusing to become a symbol or a defense. Her strength lay in restraint. When the investigation ended with no wrongdoing found, the silence that followed spoke louder than any apology. A new challenge arrived when an outsider group attempted to exploit old tensions, spreading false stories to gain influence over local land negotiations. Fear and anger resurfaced quickly, threatening the fragile balance Daniel had worked to protect. This time the pressure was immense. Daniel stood firm, addressing the community openly and exposing the lies with facts and witnesses. Nalin helped quietly, speaking to elders and reminding them of their shared history. Together, without standing side by side publicly, they dismantled the threat. It became clear that their partnership was not emotional weakness, but strategic strength. In private moments, they acknowledged the toll it took. There were nights when Daniel questioned whether his presence brought more trouble than peace. Nalin admitted that loving again had reopened old wounds she thought long healed. Yet neither regretted the path they had chosen. Pain, they agreed, was not proof of failure. It was evidence of commitment. They allowed themselves vulnerability without letting it become control. That balance became the foundation of their bond. As time passed, their relationship became quietly accepted. Children greeted Daniel without fear. Elders invited him to ceremonies without hesitation. Nalin moved freely between the settlement and town, no longer the subject of whispers. What once seemed unusual now felt natural. The age difference faded into irrelevance as people saw how they treated one another. With respect, patience, and equality, they were not defined by labels, but by conduct. One evening, after a long day, Daniel spoke about the future in a way he never had before. He wondered aloud what legacy truly meant. Not promotions or titles, but the lives touched, the conflicts resolved without violence. Nalin listened, then shared her own thoughts. She spoke of legacy as continuity, of teaching younger generations that dignity survives hardship. In that moment, they understood that their values aligned more deeply than either had realized. They were walking the same road, just from different starting points. A crisis tested them one final time when Daniel was injured while protecting a family during a violent arrest, attempt by outsiders. His recovery was slow, forcing him to step back from active duty. The town rallied around him, and the Apache community did the same. Nalin stayed by his side, not as a caretaker defined by sacrifice, but as a partner offering presence. During those weeks, Daniel learned to receive support without shame. Nalin learned that leaning on someone did not erase her independence. When Daniel returned to work, he did so with a renewed sense of purpose. He restructured how conflicts were handled, focusing more on mediation and less on force. His approach influenced neighboring towns, earning respect beyond his jurisdiction. Nalin continued her role as a quiet leader, mentoring younger women and preserving cultural knowledge. Their lives remained distinct yet intertwined. They never rushed to formalize their bond, understanding that commitment was already evident in daily action. Years later, when people spoke of them, it was not with curiosity, but with admiration. Their story became one of quiet courage, of choosing integrity over fear, and patience over spectacle. They showed that love did not need to be loud to be powerful, and that difference did not have to mean division. In a world eager for drama, they lived with intention. Their story ended not with a dramatic scene, but with continuity. Two lives moving forward together, grounded in respect, shaped by experience, and strengthened by trust. The young sheriff and the Apache woman proved that the strongest love stories are often the quietest, written not in bold declarations, but in steady, honorable choices made day after day. The years that followed were filled with quiet routines that spoke louder than words. Daniel continued his work as sheriff, handling disputes and protecting both the town and the Apache settlement. With fairness and integrity, Nalin's presence remained a constant, not intrusive, but grounding. She taught younger women the ways of their culture and shared wisdom that Daniel quietly admired. Together, they moved through each day, with a rhythm shaped by mutual respect and shared experience. One evening, after a long day of mediating a conflict between ranchers and the Apache community, Daniel and Nalin sat by the fire, the desert wind whispering around them. He looked at her and realized that their connection had grown into something deeper than admiration. It was a quiet love that needed no words. They had faced judgment, suspicion, and danger, yet their bond remained unbroken, built on honesty, patience, and courage. The town had come to accept them, not as scandal, but as an example of how age, culture, and difference could be bridged by character and integrity. Visitors and neighbors began to notice the respect in their relationship, seeing that love did not always have to be loud or dramatic to be powerful. In the final years of his service, Daniel continued to prioritize understanding over enforcement, while Nalin's guidance ensured the traditions of her people were preserved and respected. Their lives intertwined naturally, not through ceremony, but through consistent choice and care. And in that quiet partnership, both discovered a love that was steady, enduring, and profoundly human, a story of connection that would be remembered not for its drama, but for its dignity and strength.